Pretty simple. I was basically mentioning how NVIDIA and AMD would be bullish heading into tomorrow's earnings date for NVIDIA, and that would end up bringing the market up. It should technically be a bit bullish. That's pretty much what ended up happening today. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at what the next steps are for the market. We're going to take a look at the SP500, the NASDAQ, the large tech stocks, the VIX, the Russell, as well as crypto, because crypto is also bouncing. So we're going to take a look at all of these different things all in one and holistically look at what the next steps are for the market. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and let's get started with the video. To start the video off, very simply, I just want to show you guys how everything is back to a level of resistance. So the S&P 500 futures, back to a level of resistance. We came and are testing the trend line again. The NASDAQ, back to a level of resistance. We are basically testing the 38.2% fib, which was initially where we ended up falling before, right? So back to that level of resistance. And the IWM. All of these are back to levels of resistance. Now, what is most important is whether or not the strength can continue. Is this minor pullback that we had in the overall market on the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Russell, was this enough of a dip buy for a continued move to the upside? A lot of that is going to be heavily determined by what is going on with the large tech stocks, NVIDIA and AMD specifically, as well as what's happening with crypto. So let's first go ahead and take a look at all of those different things step by step. All right, so let's first take a look at Apple. This is a daily time frame of Apple. Apple, clear as day, very strong reversal bounce off of the 225 level. Spectacular. Where did it end up closing? Right at a major level of resistance. 230. It did not break and hold above 230. So you can clearly see this is strength. Trying to be bearish over here is not the best choice, right? I would much rather try to be bearish up here in this area. This would be the only place I would rather be bearish. Right here, there's still a bit more oomph to Apple. Obviously, a close like this, we basically closed on the highs. There's a bit more oomph to the upside, in my opinion. If it can hold above 228 tomorrow, there's a bit more oomph intraday on Apple. And I would not want to really become bearish unless we break back into 231, 232 area. But even then, right, being bullish, bearish, anything, holding swings overnight tomorrow, because NVIDIA has earnings tomorrow after hours. Holding some sort of swings after hours tomorrow, close dated, is very, very risky. So I would be very careful about doing any of that for any tech stock, any indice. Amazon, same concept. We bounced, but we bounced right to the major level of resistance that we were at before. So we can't break back above 230. We closed right below 229. Pretty simple. We were red to start the morning. We bounced, turned green a bit. Amazon is also showing a bit of indecision, but clearly, this is still showing a bit of strength. Once again, still showing a bit more oomph to the upside for Amazon and Apple as well. Google, same concept. Still a bit more room to the upside. It still held 207. It held 207. That's the level that needs to hold for a continued move to the upside, in my opinion, on Google. That's exactly what ended up happening. And this can continue rising. We could see above 210 and then end up seeing 215. It seems like these stocks are sort of getting to levels of resistance and trying to staircase their way up. Meta, just another stock, sort of at a level of resistance, trying to staircase its way up. Literally closed right below 755. This is clear as day. Major level of resistance. Could not really break above properly. What are you going to do? I mean, this is just another sort of literally bounce to a level of resistance, showing some strength to the upside still. Still showing a bit of oomph to the upside potentially on Meta as well. Netflix, also another one. I was mentioning how yesterday Netflix needed to really start to show some strength quickly. That is currently what's going on, in my opinion. Netflix needs in the next 2 days, Netflix needs a solid close above 1255. If it can do that, then we're going to see 1350 pretty soon, to be honest, because it really, really needs to show a lot of strength very, very soon here on Netflix. And, it's currently held 1220, showing some strength. This is a really ugly bearish pattern, but the fact that it's bouncing off of a major low here, because you have to contextualize where these bearish patterns are, right? If this bearish pattern occurred at the highs, then this is definitely bearish. But because this sort of ugly pattern is occurring bouncing off of the lows, trying to be extremely bearish down here can still be a bear trap, because the market still wants to bounce a bit. So I gave you guys the thing that essentially needs to occur for the market to bounce. If it does bounce, it's going to be a quick bounce in the next 2 days, in my opinion. Microsoft making new lows. Interesting stuff. Broke below 502. Showing some weakness here. Not looking too hot. But once again, it needs to break back above 508, 509. And if it could do that, then yeah, we could end up bouncing. But this is starting to show a lot more weakness than a lot of these other large tech stocks are. So what is not showing that much weakness is Tesla, NVIDIA, and AMD. So Tesla continues to show some strength. We held 345 here, and we closed right at 341.50. This was a major level of resistance. We ended up closing right at this level. Not the best sign. So either these stocks are right at levels of resistance, or they're showing a bit more oomph to the upside, except Microsoft. And it's interesting because these are not completely bearish signs. Things are just at resistance. So it's going to be really, really interesting. There's going to be a lot of indecision, in my opinion, in the market tomorrow, with a slight hint of bullishness. But a lot of it is going to really, really, really be determined by the chips. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So NVIDIA and AMD. NVIDIA obviously had a green day today, as expected. This was a earnings run up. Heading into earnings, price of the stock usually tends to always be bullish. So tomorrow should also be a bit bullish as well, because we have earnings tomorrow after hours. It closed right at 182. 182 is the major level of resistance that we were monitoring before. And the fact that we closed right at this level before, that very next 2 days, we saw the massive spike lower on NVIDIA. And this is where I was basically saying the fact that we could not close above 182 was bearish. Right now, the fact that we closed right at 182, it's not a similar situation, because we bounced off of the lows from 168. But guys, we're literally right at the exact same level. The only difference is that tomorrow is now NVIDIA's earnings. So it's going to be kind of interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting. I would much rather be short into NVIDIA's earnings. I know that obviously, I know things should be bullish, but honestly, I would rather be short heading into NVIDIA's earnings. Generally, earnings are 50-50. I don't know. Anyway, AMD bounced as well, up 2% today. It was one of the losers, right? A couple days ago, it was one of the losers. We held support here, bounced, gapped up. We closed right below the 6.8% fib at 169. Simple, right? So chips, as we know, chips are going to bounce. In general, there's something that you need to know. Heading into an earnings date, say for example, Apple has earnings on Tuesday, right? Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Apple should be rising. If Google has earnings Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Google should be rising. So it's always good to lean bullish into a stock's earnings date. And that was a big reason why the overall market was bullish. I was mentioning how the market would be bullish, why the chips would help pull the market up as well. But now, once again, the entire market is at a level of resistance. what else can we do to really get a good understanding for tomorrow? Really, we're not getting a solid read on what's really going on with the tech stocks. Obviously, we clearly saw a lot of these tech stocks were showing bullishness with a little bit more room to the upside, but in general, they were all at levels of resistance or showing weakness or just showing that there was some potential to the upside. But it wasn't like a lot of these setups are not like extremely, oh my goodness, let's become bullish. They're all clearly a little bullish, but they're showing a little bit more room to the upside. So the risk reward to be long to the upside is not clearly as there. You would need to be much more tight in your risk and your stop losses if you wanted to play more to the upside in a lot of these tech stocks. And that's pragmatically exactly what's going on, in my opinion. And the VIX, we need to always monitor the VIX because it has an inverse relationship to the market. If the VIX is rising, the overall market should be falling. And the VIX, we ended up opening right almost at $16. Failed, closed, and we closed below 15. It's just chopping around. We're not getting a solid direction on the VIX, but we're back at a level of support on the VIX. Things should generally bounce at a level of support, right? And we're back at levels of resistance on the overall market. So at levels of resistance, things should generally fall. So that's currently what's going on. A lot of the decision of which direction the market wants to go is going to be based on tomorrow, in my opinion. And aside from that, I mean, the only saving grace that I really, really see in terms of bullishness in the market as a whole is crypto. So if we look at these alts, right? Ethereum bounced very aggressively from the lows. It was down almost 10%, and now it's up almost 5%. Solana also aggressively bounced off the lows. Down almost 10%, bounced almost 5% today. And Bitcoin, we are at a level of resistance on Bitcoin. It still needs to break above 112, but this is the only real saving grace in terms of bullishness for the overall market, because if crypto was going to continue to capitulate, that would be very, very bearish, in my opinion, for the overall market. But the fact that Solana and Ethereum are getting some love is very, very important for the overall market, in my opinion. And that's currently what I'm looking at. So Bitcoin is bouncing. If we could break above 112, then it's going to start flying, in my opinion. We might end up retesting 114, rebounding back to around 113, but then it should just continue skyrocketing. We're holding on to Bitcoin longs with options. It's a bullish setup in general. The overall market as a whole, in terms of any sort of dip, is a great buying opportunity. Things are looking bullish, right? In general, the overall market is looking a bit bullish, as you can see. We still technically held above the various fib levels on the S&P 500 futures. We held above the 38.2 technically, as well as the 50% fib on the NASDAQ. The Russell also held support. Going long here, you would have to be it would be an aggressive long opportunity. But you could end up going long with a tight stop loss. That's really the only thing that's currently going on. Because the momentum bouncing off of support. Clearly, the momentum is bouncing off of support, and it's setting up for a bullish move. But once again, everything is at a level of resistance again. That's the only issue. So going aggressively long at a level of resistance is not always safe. Generally, what you need to do is you need to have a tight stop loss. And these are really the levels that need to hold. As you saw today, the SPY held 642. I mentioned 642 needed to hold on the SPY, and that's exactly what ended up happening. We were showing a lot of bearish setups this morning in the S&P for day trades. A lot of bearish setups, but the issue was that they were at daily levels of support, and that was a big reason why a lot of the bearish setups that we had were not being rewarded because these were at levels of support, right? So when these bearish setups happen at levels of support, the odds of the bearishness continuing decreases. So what I mean by that is, for example, Netflix, right? What I was mentioning on Netflix. Netflix, this is a very, very disgustingly bearish setup, okay? But because it's happening off of a bounce at a level of support, the odds of this falling lower decreases because of where we are on the chart, because we're at a level of support. If this setup, if this bearish pattern setup occurred at highs at a level of resistance, then I would be much more comfortable to be bearish. But the fact that this is a bearish setup happening at a level of close to a level of support, it becomes more difficult. So that's currently what happened earlier in the morning on the overall market. A lot of the market was at a level of daily support. And because of that, all of the bearish setups ended up bouncing. And they did not reward bears, in my opinion. So, not even my opinion. That's just what ended up happening. So, that's essentially it. So, we bounced off of 642. We need to hold above 644. 644 is going to be the level that needs to hold on the SPY. And taking a look at the QQQ as well. The QQQ held 568. 568 was a major level of support. We held 568, came back above 569. The level that needs to hold for a continued move to the upside, similar to SPY's 644, the NASDAQ needs to hold 571.50. And if it could do that, that's essentially the 22.6% fib. We could end up bouncing. So obviously the NASDAQ is relatively weaker. It has more room to the upside compared to where the SPY is. The SPY is already at highs due to the IWM strength, right? The NASDAQ, once again, it looks very, very similar to Meta. It looks very, very similar to a lot of these tech stocks that were just bouncing right into levels of resistance. And that's currently what's happening on the NASDAQ as well. And it's just an interesting situation. NVIDIA literally tapped at a level of resistance. AMD, a lot of these chip stocks ended up doing really well today. Tesla did well today, hit a level of resistance. So just a lot of the market in general now for the remainder of the year is going to be very heavily dependent on what happens, in my opinion, tomorrow for earnings. And that will give us a good gauge of which direction really the market wants to go. But at this point, we take it one day at a time. 571.50 needs to hold on the QQQ for a continued move up. And 644 needs to hold on the SPY for a continued move up. Nice and simple. That's really it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Take care.